Thank you so much to Rachel and Gamal for kicking us off this morning. I'm excited to welcome you to What's Possible, Bright Spots in the Field. I'm Aaron Dorfman, Executive Director of A More Perfect Union, the Jewish Partnership for Democracy, and proud member of the advisory board of the Safety, Respect, and Equity Network, Safety, Respect, Equity Network. Lisa reminded us yesterday that networks move at the speed of trust. We sometimes think of that as a constraint, but it's also a huge asset. Networks build trust, and that trust becomes the foundation for collaboration, creativity, and the sharing of ideas, which are among the only things that scale perfectly. Over the next 40 minutes, we're going to hear from leaders at 3 SRE member organizations about the initiatives that have been successful in their efforts to build safe, respectful, and equitable workplaces and communal spaces. We'll explore their behind-the-scenes processes and the different components and considerations that led to their impact. Building safe, respectful, and equitable spaces is a journey. We're all learning, asking questions, facing challenges, discovering what works and what doesn't, and navigating new paths together. As partners on this shared journey, we're going to hold a brave space for these leaders to share their on-the-ground experiences, challenges, and successes so we can learn with and from them. As we envision what's possible in our SRE network and in our work, we want to appreciate and acknowledge the tactical and practical day-to-day and the major initiatives that aspire to systemic change. And we've intentionally assembled this panel from organizations of very different sizes and missions in the hopes that the diverse members of this network can learn from the lessons each of them has to offer. It's my pleasure to introduce you to 3 of our wonderful speakers, 3 of Danya's elders, whom I'm so excited we get to learn from. Amy Martizan is the Vice President of Strategic Human Resources at Hillel International. She provides HR support and resources to Hillel professionals across North America. Hillel International enriches the lives of Jewish students so they may enrich the Jewish people and the world. Beth Kander-Doffen applies her creative and caring approach to her work as Chief Strategy Officer for the Goldring-Woldenberg Institute of Southern Jewish Life. The ISJL supports, connects, and celebrates Jewish life in 13 states across the South. And Elena Fugman is the co-founder and executive director of Tish PDX. She builds and nurtures Jewish communities and spaces that are led and centered by Jews from populations that have been historically marginalized. Tish PDX works to bolster the leadership of young and marginalized Jews in Portland, Oregon. You can read their full bios in the app. Now, let's dive in. To get us started, I'm going to ask each of you to tell us about an initiative you launched to create change in the areas of safety, respect, or equity, and walk us through your behind-the-scenes process. Amy, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. So about 5 years ago, we embarked on a mission to bring respectful workplace training to the folks at Hillel International. Thanks to Fran Zepler, we participated in a Train the Trainer opportunity there were some other folks here in the room today that were there as well. We handpicked 5 total Hillel professionals to participate in this Train the Trainer because I knew that I couldn't do it alone. Hillel generally has about 1,200 employees across the globe. And our goal was really to train as many folks as possible in this content. So we went through the Train the Trainer with Fran. We then Hillelified the training. I use that word to say, there's a ton of case studies that Fran provided that we just needed to tweak in order to fit our culture and our people. And then we rolled out the training. So over the course of the last 5 years, we've trained close to 750 Hillel professionals. And now we all speak the same language. And so it's just been like a really cool initiative to see. I'll say COVID really changed how we delivered the training. So we started off traveling to campuses across the country, delivering the training with 2 Hillel professionals facilitating at all times. And with COVID, we pivoted to virtual, delivering the training online, which, though not as great as in person, still allowed us to bring this really important content to individuals at Hillel.
Amazing, thanks, Amy. I'm particularly appreciative of that shared language, right? The value of a shared language in a workplace is so important. Beth.
Good morning. So I would say that 5 years ago, our policies and procedures, anything in place around anything having to do with SRE would be a list that looked like this. 1, good intentions. That was what we had. And I had recently rejoined the ISJL staff after working in many different places, and I was just starting to hear about some of these SRE conversations, and it planted a seed. But it was 2019 that we actually signed on and got involved, and I came to the convening in New York, and I got really motivated. And one of the first programs that we decided to implement was an ombudsperson program. Because among our panelists, we got to touch base a couple weeks ago, which was really lovely, and I learned that I'm the mid-size representative among this group, but to be clear with y'all, we have about 12 people on our staff. So it's mid-size among the 3 of us, but still a pretty small organization. So we don't have an HR person. We certainly don't have the budget to bring on an HR person, but I was relatively new at that time, senior staff person who has an MSW and had no direct reports. So we did a lot of talk with the strategic consultant we were working with at the time and piloted this program whereby we established new pathways for reporting. So if you didn't feel comfortable taking something to your direct supervisor, you could come to the ombudsperson for that initial confidential conversation. And we've continued to evolve that. So now we have multiple pathways for reporting. So if you don't feel comfortable going to your supervisor, you can go to the ombudsperson. If you don't feel comfortable going to your supervisor or the ombudsperson, you can go to the CEO. If no one on staff is a safe person for you to talk to, you can go to the board of directors. And the next step on that, which we are still working on, was a full staff handbook, which we're now on draft 2 of, and was something that we didn't have, and was something that was very much informed by the support of the SRE network. So what I'm excited to talk about in conversation with everyone today, I love the title of our session, Bright Spots, and I will everything I share sort of underscore the fact that bright spots does not mean easy spots. And working in Jackson, Mississippi with a regional organization and not a lot of staff, some of the things we have taken on would have felt impossible if we didn't have the support of SRE and the network, but we were able to start identifying really concrete steps to start taking, and we have been moving forward.
Great, thanks, Beth. Elena.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Tisch PDX started in May of 2018, which sounds familiar. I'm really glad to be here, be a sibling, a new organization. Our vision of how safety, respect, and equity would manifest that we sent in the form of a grant proposal last year to the SRE network was that in order to, our vision is to have a vibrant, just, equitable Jewish community, and that the way that will happen is by having the people who have been the most impacted and marginalized by oppression within our community and in a larger sense are in leadership, have leadership positions and are helping us decide how we move forward in terms of accountability, in terms of community building, networking, moving forward. So our key initiative, our key program is called the Emerging Jewish Leadership Incubator. We're a very small organization still. We're based in Portland, Oregon, of all places. Yes, I'm happy to be West Coast. We run 18-month cohorts, and these cohorts are designed to serve younger Jews, and when we say younger, we mean 20s and 30s, who are from what we call marginalized backgrounds. So we have a pretty wide lens there. We primarily, right now, are serving queer and trans Jews, LGBTQI. We are serving Jews of color, and we are serving Jews not raised Jewishly, which I've already had some fun conversations with people in this room about that. And our idea is that these people need to be in leadership everywhere. In this room, it should be full of people in those demographics for us to really be able to take this work on, the work of safety, respect, and equity. And so we're doing it in a very small scale. We've got 30 people that we've pushed through not pushed, hopefully, I mean, maybe pushed, but gotten through this pipeline, are now alumni of our program, and we're following their lead. We're building a staff. We have 3 people on staff, but we have a multiracial, multi-gender, multi-sexuality, multi-class staff, and that's part of our strategy.
It's amazing. Like really bright spots. And Beth, I just want to pick up on your observation. Like bright spots are not necessarily easy spots. So I'm curious for each of you to talk about a challenge or challenges that you've overcome, what you learned, how you adapted from initial concept to realization. Beth, you want to go?
Sure. So I will say that one of the challenges that we ran into early on is we have huge generational and cultural differences on our board as opposed to our staff. The ISJL has been around for 23 years, and a few of the board members have been on the board for that entire time. And I was sort of joking with the other panelists as we were walking in, like, I love this SRE convening because people just say it. Everyone is already really established that when we're up here, we're just going to say things. So I, too, am just going to say things and say
Particularly if you're Rachel.
And so when I first came with all this enthusiasm to our board saying, I think that we need to become an SRE network partner. I think that we need to take on this work. I think that it will be really meaningful for an organization based in the Deep South to demonstrate these commitments and to spread it throughout our region and do all of these things. I naively was expecting yes, let's do it. And instead I got And one of the things that one board member said was, and this is just gonna say it, funders are going to hate this. And I want us all to sit with that for a minute, because what does that mean if we're worried that funders are going to hate this? And does that mean we shouldn't be doing the work? And again, I was relatively new back in this position, and I was trying to find a way to get that board buy-in so that it wouldn't just be me convincing them. And I will say that, again, one of the gifts of the SRE network is I was able to swiftly name a few big foundations that my board was very familiar with that were not going to hate this because they were helping make it happen. And being able to say that, being able to say, well, I know that the Schusterman family philanthropies are actually not going to hate it if we take this on, was huge and did get some of that initial consideration on the table more quickly. So I will say that that's part of the power of the network, is being able to draw on who else is doing this work. And another thing that really helped me get board buy-in was to make things less abstract. Not we're just going to sign on for this movement, because that was another board comment I got, was this is just jumping on the bandwagon of the Me Too movement. This is going to be over in a year or two. Like, we don't need to shift our whole approach for something that's a flash in the pan. And so taking it, hearing that as well, and taking it from an abstract concept of this great, big, wonderful idea, and instead making it into some concrete goals that we were going to set, and some of the ROI, some of the return on investment that they could expect to see. And I will say that, for example, recruiting and hiring folks right out of college who have this a lot more on their radar was a huge thing. And in fact, we got comments during our interview processes within the first year when we added an SRE statement to our website, and when we added it to our equal opportunity hiring statement on every job that we posted, and when we added pronouns to our email addresses, all of things that happened in the last couple of years. All of that had people in interviews saying, I wouldn't have expected that from an organization in Mississippi. I wasn't sure if I would be welcome here. So being able to identify some really concrete things and then report back to the board each year on concrete ways that it positively impacted our organization was definitely a way that we started to get that board buy-in and trickle down to getting more communities excited about this work as well.
I love that. So there's both, I think, the imprimatur, the hecture of the network, and particularly funders as like an essential ingredient in this. And then the kind of tactical, practical, incremental steps that prove value over time. I love that. Amy, do you have thoughts about this?
Yeah, I would say thanks to the generous funding of SRE, resources were not a challenge for us. What became a challenge, in fact, from the beginning, like we were like full motion, moving forward, rolling out the training. The challenge hit us, well, twofold. One, COVID, which I already spoke about, but the other is since 2018, when we went through the Respectful Workplace training with Fran, we've lost 3 of the 5 professionals who were licensed to lead this training. So the challenge is really now, it's me and 1 other professional, and we still really want to get this training out there. It's super important, it's great content, and there's just less of us able to do it, so we're not able to make the same impact that we made in the beginning. And then the second challenge that I'll speak to is content, right? The content is great, and this is something Fran and I talked about last night. Like, it's time for a refresh. So I think, our plan is to go back to Fran and figure out what our Respectful Workplace 2.0 training looks like, because times have changed. And while the message is really still the same, we really want to do a refresh and hopefully get additional professionals trained so that it's not just me and 1 other.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. Elena, do you have thoughts about this, about challenges that you've encountered and had to overcome?
Yeah, because our model is to do intentional outreach to find those leaders that we need to be building, the challenge is finding people. I think probably everyone in this room can relate to this, that when you're building diversity in your world, in your networks, you need to talk to people who aren't like you. You need to have a lot of conversations, you need to make mistakes, you need to approach people, you need to go outside of your comfort bubble. And so our process, the fact that we've been able to find and recruit these 30 young Jewish leaders so far in Portland, Oregon, who are from all these diverse backgrounds means that it's a challenge to do recruitment, but we've spent the time. I think that's really what I want to share. And I've seen this more and more in the Jewish world. I've seen a lot of more postings for outreach directors, and this is really key. If you're going to build that environment that's going to have safety, respect, and equity because you have this diversity of thought and experience and people who've experienced harm. Our staff and our cohort members are feminists, are female assigned, are non-binary, are trans, are survivors. But to find those people, it takes a lot of one-on-ones. It takes a lot of conversations, going to people's events, going out of your way, making your work plan look different than it feels like it should, prioritizing people and relationships over maybe a program or a product or something that you promised somebody. So that's been our challenge, but also our success. And the representation is important too. I just want to say that because I'm queer, because I was not raised Jewishly, because I'm female, I have been able to bring people into this network that would not have come. And the same for me. I didn't come into Judaism until I was 20. I mean, I have a Jewish parent, but I had no contact with the Jewish community. And it was a dyke Shabbat, a lesbian event in San Francisco. Yeah, exactly.
Dyke
in the
Shabbat's
1990s that welcomed me in. And so that's our goal, is to continue to create those spaces.
That's fantastic. Okay, I've got some specific questions for each of you about your. It's all good. It's all good.
Drama.
It's all good.
Drama,
all good.
You're welcome.
Exactly. Specific questions about each of your particular organizational contexts. And Elena, I want to build on what you were just saying. Being radically inclusive of folks with marginalized identities is at the core of how Tisch PDX creates community. How do you bring an intersectional lens to bear on your work in building safe, respectful, and equitable community for everyone?
Thanks, Aaron. I like to just start right at the beginning and give Audre Lorde my credit here. She was my first teacher when I was 19 years old, starting college, doing feminist studies, black studies, lesbian studies. And she said, we do not lead single issue lives. There's no such thing as a single issue life. And so for me, that's been a core of the work we do, is we're not single issue. So my co-director, who I don't think people here know yet, but you should, Derek Travers, couldn't be here today to present. But what she has brought to our curriculum and our design is that racial justice and gender justice are one and the same, that you cannot separate these, that what it means to work for gender justice and racial justice together is that no one is treated differently in our society and our communities based on their race or their gender. And this has been a key part of our curriculum. We teach this to our fellows. Our fellows come in, many of them know this already, but we all have to keep learning what that means, what it looks like. And I would say the other key here is that, and I mentioned this before, but in this just young 5 years, what I've noticed is that the building of safety and respect and equity in the workplace, which is something I'm very new to. This is my first time being an ED. For me, has been about informal spaces, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this as EDs yourself or CEOs, but I get the best feedback when I'm not in a staff meeting, and even sometimes not at a review. I have gotten very good feedback, but I get the best feedback over coffee, on a walk, about what we're doing and what we're not doing from our cohort, from our staff people. I think that the relationships, that you show up, that you show that you're there to listen, to hear, especially if you're in a demographic that's not being, that's different, and that's in an oppressor role or in a role of power. And I see the remarkableness of the safety we've created that way. So thank you.
That's amazing, Elena. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Beth, as organizations begin their SRE work, securing buy-in from leadership is really key, and you've already alluded to this. I'm curious about how you kind of built board buy-in for advancing safety, respect, and equity at ISJL, how you navigated naysayers. You spoke about this a little bit. I'm curious to go deeper. And how do you strike the right balance between the urgency that these issues demand and the patience and diplomacy necessary to build support that's sustainable over time?
Thank you for the very simple question.
90 seconds. No.
I will say this. To whatever degree you do feel comfortable sharing the personal, which folks have already done several times, the Jewish communal world did lose me. I went off and I worked in film production and video and pursuing creative aspects of my career that I do still do now part-time. And truly part of what brought me back to the Jewish communal world was hearing about the SRE network and wanting to be part of change like this. And I felt comfortable enough with my board that I could give the personal example of the Jewish communal world is definitely at risk of losing me and professionals like me again if we don't start doing this work. So I think that that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give our boards and communities is our honesty and transparency and showing how much we care about this. And then sort of echoing what I was saying earlier, making that into concrete steps that we can take. So it's not just this threat of you could lose us if you don't do something, but it's here's what you can do to help keep people. So I mentioned our Ombudsperson program earlier. I mentioned that we started work on a handbook. We are very fortunate to be just kicking off a 2-year grant from SRE that is allowing us to build up our internal scaffolding. And it was sort of a shock both to the whole team, to the staff and to the board when I was telling them that no, this is just for internal. And they're like, okay, right, but so when do we have to do a scalable program that we bring to everyone in our 13-state region? Like, what's the work that we have to do to get this out there? I'm like, we'll get there. This grant is to help us internally really make concrete all of this work that we've started to do. So we are able to bring in outside consultants and we are able to map out 2 years and then beyond that of what action steps we can take. And I think that most board members, when they sign on, and the leadership when they step into their roles, it's because they care about the organization and they want good things for the organization. And this really is stewarding that and just redirecting it toward the work that we need to be doing in this field and showing that it's just as important as the programs we're delivering to people, because we're going to lose not just marginalized folks, but everyone who cares about everyone, unless we're part of doing the work and embedding that in our culture. And what I will say is 4 years in, I had an old supervisor who liked to joke that if you do something once, it is brand new and innovative and it's never going to work. And if you do something twice, it's tradition. And now you have to keep doing it that way. That's how we've always done it. So now we have an SRE overview as part of our orientation and onboarding for every new staff member. We have on our calendar twice a year SRE professional development. We have it on our website, and now it's tradition. And for folks who joined our staff within the last 3 years, this is how it's always been here.
The power of minhag hamakom, like the traditions embedded in a place. That's beautiful. Amy, as organizations plan the education and training that they provide to staff, there's so much to consider, from which topics to focus on, how to make the training engaging and participatory for their staff. I'm curious about how you make the training engaging. You already alluded to like wanting to kind of refresh it, but how do you focus on which content to foreground, and how have you noticed that change is happening and things are shifting following the trainings that you provide?
Yeah, so the training that we facilitate is really rooted in respect, and we speak to a whole continuum of behaviors. But we really start from a place of respect because that's where we want people to be, right? And then we talk about what goes wrong when respect goes off the rails. But to make the training engaging, we do a ton of case studies, a ton of interactive moments, because people don't want to be talked at, right? They want to be part of it. And in order to help them learn, we're really creating an opportunity for them to practice. What I've learned in terms of what folks have taken away from these trainings is when I spoke to the shared language earlier, but I've had people come to me months later saying, like, Amy, you gave me the ability to say, hey, that's not cool, when somebody did something that I didn't appreciate. And so it's through those small moments that we're making incremental change, right? So if somebody does something, we're giving them the power and the language to stop the behavior that they're witnessing, and we're teaching them to be bystanders and upstanders to really address behavior in the moment, so that it doesn't fester and it doesn't move along that continuum to a place where we don't want it to be.
And that, I feel like that experiential quality of case studies and like living into the practice, so that the encounter with the real thing isn't the first time somebody's like practiced the skill. I think that's so powerful. So we're going to come back down the line this way. Amy, what advice would you share with this network, your peers and colleagues here? What's the like one big learning that you want to leave people with as a takeaway that you want them to know?
That's a really hard question.
I know.
No pressure, right? I think one is like, do the work, right? It is so important. It's so necessary. It's what's going to allow our organizations to thrive and the people in them to be engaged and enjoy their experiences within the organization. So just do the work. And then two is, don't be afraid to ask for help, right? We never would have been able to do this without the help of SRE, and I never would have been able to deliver the content that I deliver without the help of Fran Zeppler.
Awesome. Beth, advice?
I'm a list maker, so if it goes on my list, it happens, and if it doesn't go on my list, it's not going to happen. So my advice is, especially if you already have any data points or information available, for example, we participate in the Leading Edge survey. So I started with our Leading Edge survey results with insights into our organization and where people's frustration points were, and let that shape my list of issues to address. So like pathways for reporting was at the top, because when asked if people knew what to even do if they had any issue with harassment or something, it was a very clear no. People didn't know what to do. So looking at the information that you have, or gathering the information if you don't have it, surveying your staff to figure out what your needs are, then make a list, because that way you will be prepared when you're getting that board buy-in, when you're taking it to leadership, when you're getting the ball rolling. You will already know and have those concrete examples of here are the steps that we need to take. And if it goes on the list, it gets done.
Oh, yeah, tell me about it. Elena, I'll come to you last. And in addition to advice, I'm curious for you, as you look ahead, what do you dream of making possible next?
Need a microphone. I think what I've been thinking about in response to this question, because we did get to prepare, is that in the process of building and supporting the building of this vibrant Jewish community, I see somewhere that I think we're all struggling, which is one term that I've been taught is it's called internalized oppression. So I think this happens in our community as people female assigned, or we attack each other. In the queer community, I see it happen, that the oppressions that are coming at us get lived out at each other. And this vision that we have for this vibrant, just, equitable community is going to be derailed by these activities and these actions. And I think that I love that that we're talking about tshuva in this room. And when there's harm happening in our communities. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And Sarah Chandler gave me a little breakdown last night of the Ta'amod training and how we talk about the levels of harm. And I'm not talking about things that we need to report right now. I'm talking about microaggressions. I'm talking about ways that we subtly undermine each other as queer people, as female identified people, as people of color, as Jews of color in our organizations. And so what I'm really hopeful about this group of people being able to support and move forward are internal systems. I almost have this vision of a radical queer Beit Din, like a group of people. When you have an issue, when there's something happening in your organization, that's what I would like for Tish, that you have, that you have these three people that you go to, that you bring the issue, that you talk it through, and that we move on, and that we continue to do this work for justice and liberation together, that we do not get derailed. So that's where I'm at.
Oh, yeah. Kenny Ratzon. So I don't have this in my notes. I just want to say thank you to the SRE professional team for inviting me to moderate this panel, because it has been a gift. Thank you to our amazing panelists for sharing their experiences and ideas with all of us and modeling how to be vulnerable in sharing challenges and successes. It's the kind of vulnerability that makes, I think, really deep learning possible. SRE Network is sort of predicated on the idea that every member of this community has experiences to share that will benefit the entire network as we all learn with and from each other. We're all more equipped for the work of building safe, respectful, and equitable workplaces when we don't have to recreate the wheel and can learn from the lessons others have discovered in their own work. So I would say about this is steal this, right? Like steal this. We want to invite you to share your successes, small or large, with our community. On your table, you'll find cards to write on for our interactive gallery. During the upcoming break, please take a couple of minutes to answer the prompt on those cards. What practices have you made possible in your SRE journey, and what do you imagine making possible in your future work? We'll collect them and place them in our interactive gallery wall downstairs that you can explore during our breaks and meals throughout the day. Again, thank you so much to our wonderful speakers and to all of you for your commitment to this work.
Thank you, Erin, for moderating.
A quick logistical note, we are now entering a 15-minute break. Please be back in your seats at 10:45 to learn with